What is up, podcast land? Welcome to the new and improved version of the 2 Dates in a Dash podcast. I am your host, Matt Cubbler, and before I introduce my very special guest, Coach Chuck Prinzen, I'm going to take care of some house business. First of all, I'm coming to you live on the Squawker app. Anybody that wants to listen to the show live can listen on the Squawker app. That's Squawker, SQUAWKR.co. You can find it on your iPhone or your Droid and download the app. This episode is brought to you by Max Out. Max Out Equipment. Max Out Equipment is the premier leading developer of eccentric strength training technology. The patented E-Force technology easily adapts to any commercially made full or half squat rack without voiding the manufacturer's warranty. The E-Force technology allows you to precisely load the lifter with the desired amount of weight in both the eccentric and concentric motion, with the knowledge that the load variable will remain constant throughout the entire set on every rep, unlike traditional bands and chains. It's quite simply the most advanced piece of strength training technology ever created. For more information, please visit www.maxoutequipment.com. So, as everybody knows, with the 53 previous episodes that I did from my spare bedroom in my house, I dedicate a show. Today, I'm dedicating the show to my buddies John and Frankie, who I bought into them as guys and as potential radio guys a couple years back when they started their 215 Live radio show, which then became 215 Live podcast. I sponsored them with my company, and it's been fun to see the growth of what they're doing as far as the podcast world. And thanks to them, Yellow Jacket Media is a possibility for me to be a part of. So I'm very thankful to Frankie and John and the 215 Live guys and the Cracked Bell crew, who is also the co-founders of Yellow Jacket Media. And it's going to allow me the opportunity to grow my brand, grow my speaking brand, my podcast brand, and help share more stories with more people. So that's my dedication is to Frankie and John for their vision and their ability to execute on their vision. So thank you, buddies. All right, my man Chuck Prinzen is we don't know each other, like we've never physically met, but we know each other through plenty of social media interactions and following each other and what we're doing. Chuck is he's many things, but most importantly, he's a guy that just cares. He cares about kids. He cares about people who want to improve their lives. He's a speaker. He's a mentor. He's a life coach. He's a football coach. He's got many different things that he does. And I'm very happy to have him on the show today. He's been very patient in allowing me to have this month of growth to try to figure out how to move this into a studio. And I'm very thankful that he is my first guest on the new and improved 2 Dates in a Dash podcast. What is up, Chuck? How are you?
I'm blessed every day. Thank you for asking.
I'm so happy that we got this done. I'm so happy that we're supposed to have you on a while back, and then you had a family emergency, and then I was supposed to have you on again, and then this happened with the change in venue and going to a more professional layout on the show. So I'm very happy that you're
here. And so am I, and I'm numero uno, man. Nothing better than that.
You are leading the charge of the new and improved show, and no better way than share somebody who's a lot like me, that wears his heart on his sleeve, isn't necessarily into anything for notoriety, just more so to make an impact in the world. And what we're going to do today is we're going to share your amazing story. We're going to talk about the trials and tribulations you've been through, the struggles in your life, and how you've learned from those to help other people avoid the same pitfalls that maybe you went through. So with every show I do, I ask one question. And that question is, who is Chuck Prinzen?
I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor of generational cycles of negativity that was passed down on to me from the generations before me. And I had many cycles in one that over the years I've learned how to overcome.
So let's talk about that, because that's a big term, right? cycles of negativity, and that implies generational problems.
Mhm.
And we are all, whether we admit it or not, victims on some level of negative impacts from family members or people in our lives who have hurt us or caused us trauma, whether it's big trauma or small trauma. We've all gone through some level of trauma in our lives. Let's talk about yours. Let's talk about how you came to understand what that term means and the impact that it had on you in your life.
Well, let's start with the promise that I made at 3 years old when I was severely beat by my stepdad. They took me and put me in a safe home, and in that safe home is where I made a promise to God at 3 years old when I looked up in the backyard at a swing set, and I said, "I know you're up there because they taught me this in Sunday school. Jesus loves me. Yes, I know. So do me a favor, God, if you're listening to me, let me get old. And if you let me get old, I promise you I will make it right. I'm soon to be 64, and through the years, I'm still making it right." That being said, in all that ugly, I went to 28 schools by my 10th grade, my sophomore year in high school. I went to 18 elementaries, I went to 9 juniors, and at 16 years old, I finally ran away from home and went to a mentor that I had, which was a young lady that ended up becoming my sister because she told her widowed mom that I needed help, and her mom adopted me at 16 and kind of sort of made things right. So I mean, we can go through a lot of things for me to answer your question, but the bottom line is this: at 26 years old, I had my issues because of my childhood. I mean, I was physically, mentally, sexually, almost killed twice by my stepdad. My mother died on Mother's Day, 1979, due to 23 years of abuse, and I can't say she never broke away, because obviously I didn't go to all those schools for nothing. But she finally passed because her body gave up at 43 years old. So I knew that I had these things, but it wasn't until I started physically abusing a 6-year-old child when I was 26, 27 years old that I said, wait a minute, something is wrong here. And I've never been one of a doctor person. I kind of just did my thing, but something was wrong. And it kind of sort of caught my thought process of how could I, being raised the way that I was raised, physically abused, how can I do this? So I decided to seek help. And I went to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I can't remember which one it is. And he told me I had traits. And I asked him what a trait was. And he explained to me that a trait, I used the word cycle, is something that you can get from, whether it's a positive trait, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, Easter Bunny, heck, even the tooth fairy, that you can get in a positive way that is passed down from generation to generation. And that's a positive way. Or you can have traits of negativity, such as I had. And he said, your stepdad, Cal, is coming out in you. You are an abuser. Whoa, 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 whoa. No, I'm not. Well, yes, I am. And so when I had to visualize and agree that, because you can be an alcoholic, but you're not an alcoholic unless you agree that you're an alcoholic. Right? The Hawaiians say, unless you go to you're not an alcoholic unless you go to the AA meetings. But like anything else, you have to acknowledge that you have something. And for most cases, traits or cycles are attached to you from generations, and you don't even know you have them. So I had to start thinking about what else do I have attached to me? And when I broke it down, I have illiteracy, suicidal. I did attempt suicide at 50 years old when there was too much pressure from a divorce and everything else. Drugs, alcohol, abuse, whether it be domestic violence or child abuse. All these things were attached to me, and I knew that I needed to break them. So that's where my platform or my brand is helping people become aware, more so the youth of today. Because if I can help them become or be aware of and understanding cycles and why they're having problems at home with their parents, and how they can make those changes at a younger age, middle school, high school, first year high school, because I work with a lot of freshmen, then we can help them break away and clean those things up through them, where there becomes a detachment.
I think there's a lot there. Boys, there are a lot there.
And so breaking.
We got plenty of time, which is good. So we're going to touch them all.
You steer it, and I will. And if you need to make a right or a left, we'll change that. But again, I'm honored to tell the story.
That's the beautiful part of the show, is there's no plan. So it's usually just how the conversation goes, and I think this is going to be one that helps a lot of people. So you talked about the abuse, the mental, physical, and sexual abuse, the constant changing of schools, the nomadic lifestyle that you were living until you finally broke free at 16 and ran away and were adopted. Let's go back to the early stages, the relationship you had with your mother, how the stepfather came into be, and how that relationship evolved. Because I have a stepdad, and I had a stepmom, my biological father I haven't spoken to since 1995, and he's remarried. He got remarried when I was 12. She was an abuser, and there will be never another relationship with them ever again. I don't even know if they're alive or what's going on. But my stepdad's the opposite. Now, he was a disciplinarian, but the things that I learned over time was that sometimes young boys need discipline. And so there's a differentiation between discipline and abuse, I believe. And I think we need to go back and talk about your scenario and your situation and how the stepdad came into the picture, your mom, the relationship you had with your mom, and your beliefs in whether or not she has any culpability in this process. What happened? So let's talk about the initial meeting of your stepdad and when he came into your life.
My stepdad came into my life when my mother and my father separated or divorced when I was 2. My father got my sister and my mother got me. So there's 2 blood brothers and sisters. I went with mom, and mom remarried to my stepdad when I was a little over 2 years old, not quite 3. And so now we have a family. I have a mom, I have a dad, and obviously I'm still just a very young man trying to figure out where life is going. And again, Cal was an abuser. He was an abuser to my mom, and he was an abuser to me.
Was that immediate? Was that right at the very beginning that started?
Well, I'm going to have to, I'm just personally for me, I'm going to have to say that it definitely was an eye awakener the night that he beat me, and they incarcerated him and put him in jail. And they would not give me back to my mother, even though she was a hardworking waitress. She was the reason why I was in that environment, because she has chances to leave. She did not. So I was put into a safe home for 6 months, watched over by CPS, until they proved, meaning Kat, my mother, and Cal, my stepdad, proved that they were fit parents. I don't know what they did to prove that they were a fit parent, because nothing changed. Obviously, in that 6 months, upon my promise and how I was being treated, there was thoughts of, what's next? Am I going to stay here? But eventually I was told I was going to go back home because my parents had completed, I'm saying this in forward brand, okay, just so people can understand, that they had made an attempt and had proven that they were fit parents, and I could come back into that home. So at that time, yeah, I'm awake now. I'm 3 years old. I know exactly what's going on. I can remember from the night of the beating on that it did not change. Well, it changed temporarily, because alcohol and stuff will do that to you. You can go through times of being kind of sort of, Cal was a hard worker. He was a carpenter. He was a hard worker. He was a good provider. Okay. But he had issues. And those issues were things that he grew up with from his dad, which were physical, mental, a lot of mental on both my mother and myself. Now, I love my mother, and we had a great relationship, but my mother loved alcohol and she loved Cal. So she stayed with Cal for 23 years. And again, the amount of elementary schools and junior high schools was a fact that she would get beat up, stabbed, I mean, cut with swords. I mean, ugly. And we would go on welfare. We'd go into a hotel. We'd stay at a hotel, or we would go to a relative's house, be on welfare, and then she said she loved him. So she loved him enough that she went back to that life. And my thought was always, why? But my mother, I'm her son, and I was still a child, and so I go where mom goes.
Now, when you made the comment that you still love your mom, that you always loved your mom, did you ever have conflict as you were growing up and working through your own demons? Did you ever have conflict with the fact that your mom chose Cal? Was that something that because I know I can tell you that I went through that with my dad, that he always chose my stepmom over me and my brother, no matter what. It was always whatever she wanted, whatever she needed. If she didn't want us coming that weekend, we didn't come. And there were months where we didn't see my dad, and it was because of her. And I felt that hate, for lack of a better word, for her, because she caused my dad to choose her over us. Did you have those kind of conflicts within you?
No, I didn't have those kind of conflicts because my father, again, generational cycles. Okay, my father is soon to be 85, and he has never in his life seen his father. He had thoughts. I was 7 when my father came back into my life. Prior to that, I was told that my father was in and out of prisons. Okay, he was given away. He was given to the state of California at 12 years old. So he had his problems, but that basically he didn't want nothing to do with me. And that's kind of sort of what I was told by my mother's mother and my father's mother, that I was a bastard child. And so what else did I have? I had Cal. I had my mother and I had Cal. So there was never, other than the fact that my dad came into my life, my father came into my life at 7 years old, out of nowhere. And one particular day he was breaking bricks, because my father was into martial arts, was breaking bricks and 2x4s in front of me, and took me to my stepdad and said, "Hey, this is my son. This is now my father telling my stepdad that I'm his son." That's a kind of sort of weird interaction, because I was always told he never wanted me in the first place. So here I'm standing there like, and he's telling Cal that if he ever finds out that he puts his hands on me again, he's going to break his neck. And I'm like 7 years old, like, yeah, dude, he going to break your neck, man. He going to take care of you. No, my father left and didn't come back into my life until I was 17. So I had 10 years left with Cal after my father said he'd break his neck. So yeah, it wasn't a good thing, but Cal was who I had until my mother died, again on Mother's Day, and I buried her, and I don't have to deal with that anymore.
So, man, there's a lot there. Let's deal with mom, because mom was the most present person in your life.
Yep.
Once you became an adult, once you had the ability to choose where you were going to be, and you had been adopted by the woman who became your mom. Yeah.
Surely.
When you were loved, for lack of a better term, by Shirley, did you have conflict over that, yes, receiving that love from another person who you look to as a mentor or a mother type figure?
The answer is yes, with a question mark, because growing up, love, not just myself, but my mother, was after beatings, either one of us, and then comes the "I'm sorry, I love you." So for me, love all those years was attached to ugly, was attached to beatings. So when I went and got adopted by Shirley, my mom, a Japanese mom, the only conflict I had, I still love my mother to this day, and I have forgiven her because I know that she had a disease, and all women in domestic violence deal with this insecurities, low self-esteem, because their abusers take that and put it on them. So I never had a problem with loving my mother. I mean, I did later on in life, and hopefully we can discuss that. But the problem that I had was truly trying to understand what love was, because I now am in a family, widowed, 2 daughters, that mom would wake up every morning, have my breakfast made for me. She made my lunch, my dinner. I had new clothes. I didn't have to go to the lost and found or steal them. She never took any of the money from the state. And so I was loved, but I was like, this is weird, because I really don't know what it's like to be loved. So there was a conflict for a long time for me to get over or understand what the true meaning of love was.
I can get that when you don't know what true love is, your belief system into what it is going to be jaded. And then when you get that love received, it's like a woman who's been in an abusive relationship finally meets a guy that loves and cares for her. She becomes self-destructive in it because she doesn't know how to handle that positive attention, that love. And you become, and it's very similar to what you're talking about with the generational cycles, is that you become acclimated and accustomed to the version of love that you were raised upon. And the beautiful part of doing this show is that I only know what I read on your page on your website, and
Yes.
and what we've shared back and forth a little bit on social media, but I don't know the depth of your story. And the uncovering this is going to be something that I enjoy, but I also think it becomes therapeutic and cathartic to people who are listening who may have gone through something similar. So
it's ugly, and I'm glad that there's no rating on this, because I've done a lot of lives. Okay, and we have to kind of sort of be. Again, there's a rating, PG kind of. I don't know what level we can go up, but the highest level you want to go, Matt, I'm ready, because this story, this reason, the promise, okay, is the reason why I'm on your show, and I want to give it just the way it is, factual, raw, real, because I want this to touch others that are in the situation. Because, Matt, I came from a mine. I was so deep in the mine that it was dark, and I dug it. And I know there's others in there that need to come out, and I want to bring them out, man. So thank you so much. You steer it, brother, and I'll let you have it. Just be ready.
So trust me, I'm ready.
Okay.
So we're gonna back off Mom and Shirley for a second, and I want to go back to Cal, because we kind of left him out in the stratosphere. Your mom passed away at 43. What happened with Cal after you left and you went with Shirley and you started to live your life more on your terms than on theirs, because you're now older and more mature? What was the relationship? You said your dad came back at 17. What was your relationship with Cal from, say, 17 on?
Okay. Cal was still, my mother didn't pass away till I was almost 21. So there was almost 5 years. They were still, look, I have manners. I'm courteous. I'm humble. I'm very respectful. And a lot of that Cal gave me, but how he gave it to me, the abuse that went along with the lesson, was not cool. But I understand it, and I'm grateful. So I still went back and saw my mother. I still went back and visited them. It just wasn't very often. And even my mom on my graduation night forced me to invite my mother and Cal to my graduation because I knew they would embarrass me. They always did. And here I am in a safe home. I'm loved. I feel it. Okay. So Cal was part of the package of my mom. And Cal continued to be abusive to my mother until she passed away. And I had to deal with that. The problem is I had to eliminate, and I did this at one time in my life. I was 20. My mother tried to force me to drink alcohol at a bar. I didn't want to. And I walked out of that bar on Mother's Day, a year before she passed. I walked out of that bar and I said, my mother is gone. Pat is still alive. And Pat is staying with Cal. If I hadn't done that, Matt, I probably would have went and I probably would have killed Cal. Straight up. I probably would have just gotten rid of him because he was ugly and he was evil.
So after your mom passes away, and you said she died on Mother's Day a year later.
She died on Mother's Day at 44 years old.
What
on Mother's Day?
For how long, if at all, did you maintain any level of connection with Cal?
I always did. I mean, I tell a story how I went there and I was in the martial arts and Cal asked me, he was drunk as always, and he asked me to show him my stuff. And I said, Dad, and I still called him Dad. I don't know why. I guess it's just a respect thing. I still called him Dad. And I told him I couldn't do it because the type of martial arts that I took was more street, like boxing, like kung fu, and on reaction and reflex. And finally, he caught me off guard because I went and talked to my mom, and I ended up taking him down. I ended up putting a hit on him, and he looked like the Matrix. If you ever saw the Matrix, kind of going backwards, it was slow motion, and he hit his head on the ground, and his dentures fell out. And I wanted so bad because he was gasping for air. I gave him a whammy right to the solar flex, and I wanted so bad to tell him and laugh, but I didn't. I picked him up and I brushed him off. And I give him back his teeth, and I would still go and have dinner with Mom and Dad. However, Cal cut my mother one time with a sword that required 80 stitches on her leg, and I found out about it, and I'd had enough. They only lived 3 blocks from me. 3 or 4 blocks is where my mother lived for me in my foster home. So I walked over, and I was prepared, and I walked in the door, and Cal's sitting on the sofa. Evidently, he must have knew because this was after I took him out. This is after I did a whammy on him. Okay, he asked for it. I didn't want to give it to him, but he asked for it, so I gave it to him. He had a couple butcher knives, a hatchet, a hammer, and the sword that he cut my mother with on the table, the coffee table, waiting for me because he knew I was coming. Man, dude, I just laughed. I laughed, shook my head, and walked out. And then the next time I saw him is when it was at my mother's funeral. He wanted to open this casket one more time. I mean, the drunks came. They were drunk the same way they had their parties, and they wouldn't let her be put to rest in peace. Yelling, screaming, cussing, picking her head up, kissing, putting lipstick all over her forehead and everywhere. And I just stood there, Matt, and held my mud because that was the last time that I had any contact with any of those people, and that was 40 years ago. I wiped the slate clean, and I was just right at 20, not quite 22 years old. So I wiped the slate clean when I laid my mother to rest, and she's in some cemetery out there in the middle of nowhere. And I laugh about this with Robert and Raymond on each side of her. And when I go and clean her up, I ask her how the pinochle game or the Yahtzee game's going, because I know that she I know she's resting now. And I left her with a necklace, a silver necklace of a seagull that had a battery in the back. The battery and the light was red. And I left that on my mother's chest when they buried her. And so my mother's in heaven. And I have nothing to do with that side of the family. I have my promise and where I want to go with my life, helping others that they don't have to deal with it. And if they are dealing with, hopefully they're not dealing with everything that I dealt with, but help them break those cycles and break that ugly.
So let's, we laid a pretty good foundation of your childhood. Let's start to talk about how the manifestation of the cycles of abuse that you went through, how they became damaging in your life through your 20s and 30s. Because you mentioned about a suicidal thoughts or an attempt when you were 50. So obviously there was a building phase of those demons inside of you throughout your early adult life. Let's talk about post mom passing, post having any more contact with Cal. What was life like in your 20s and 30s in the world of Chuck?
The first thing I want to touch on, this has to be said. I have PTSD from my childhood. You're aware of PTSD. You don't have to be in the military to have PTSD. I have PTSD from the trauma of my childhood. When I was 15 years old, just real quick, I snapped. My mother she was drunk. She got up, she started slapping me across the face. I mean, physically slapping me as hard as she could, and I took it until I blacked out. I blacked out. I know what the dark side is like of the PTSD. I know it. I felt it. It's ugly. When I woke up and I came to vision, okay, I call the other side Chucky. I've been saying that Chucky's been protecting me for years, because when that little kid needed help, Chucky came out. And it's not pretty. I beat my mother, man. I beat her. And I don't know how many times I struck her, but I do know this, that when I woke up, she was at the base of my feet in a fetal position, and I had beaten her. My best friend saw it, and my aunt was there. My stepdad's sister was there. They both saw what I did to my mother, and I didn't even know I did it. It hurts, but it's scary more than anything else. And that's why I said when I went back to see Cal, it wasn't me going back there. So post, my brother, look, I started drinking when I was 9 years old. I sniffed acid. I sniffed glue at 11. I was incarcerated for the first time at 7 years old because of the environment that I lived in, the ugly. And so the alcohol, all of that went with me through my 20s. Drugs, cocaine, acid, Sherman, you name it, I did it. Most of it was self-medicated. However, I always worked. After the passing of my mom, I got on the docks, and I retired from the Teamsters Union after 29 years on LA Long Beach Harbor, and I'm a retired Teamster with a pension. So I always had the good focus. It was the stuff that was attached to me that I started realizing was attached to me after I became physically abusive with a 6-year-old girl. I was abusive to my girlfriends. I got an annulment, should have never got married, got an annulment with my first, my first love is my Hawaiian, my baby, the mother of our 40-year-old or 46-year-old daughter now. That's a totally different story, but life took us in different directions at 16 and 14, and we reunited. Hopefully we can touch on that, because that's the good part of life. But I dealt with all of that. I dealt with anger. I dealt with drugs. I dealt with relationships, broken relationships. And then I finally got married. So not only did I have a child at 17, I had another daughter at 22. So I had 2 daughters out there, and I'm out there doing the generational, because there's no relationship between us, especially the youngest, or excuse me, the oldest. So I got married in 1983 to a lady that I loved very much, still love. And we had a 23-year relationship, but that relationship was based on raising a daughter, finally, raising a daughter, because I struck out on the other two the right way. Mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncles, all of that. And it was more her side, because my side is dysfunctional. Nobody really knows anybody. And I wanted my youngest to be raised in the environment that's a way a child is supposed to be raised. No abuse, no drugs, very little alcohol, cheerleading, pageants, dancing, all of that. I put into a 23-year relationship, a marriage, to make it right. And along the way, understanding the droppings, the shedding, the skin, shedding, like a rattlesnake, shedding the skin of these cycles that I am now aware of have attached themselves to me, and I'm getting rid of one by one. That's where you say they drop, like, if you read my thing, they drop like, once the first one dropped, the other one started to drop, because I realized, that I had these traits attached to me. And I didn't want them in my life. Not only did I not want them in my life anymore, I didn't want them to follow me to my next generation, which had already done, but we've cleaned that up. I have a great relationship with my oldest daughter on the islands, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all of the above, and I have a great relationship with my number two. Number three, kind of sort of is not real happy of how everything went down, because she had it all. But I stayed true to changing cycles that were put on me.
So you mentioned early on that you had become like Cal with your child. I'm assuming the oldest, or was it which one was the one that
it was my second daughter's stepsister. She was 3 years older than Charlene. And so I had a 4-year relationship with the mother, and that's the young lady that I was abusing, my middle daughter's half sister.
And physically abusing, I'm assuming.
I was throwing her against the wall. I was abusing her. And that's when I went to seek help.
When you went to seek help, how long did it take for you to go from your first day going and saying something's wrong to when you started to identify the cycles that were living inside of you, then to beginning to do things to help not only do things in the future better, but make amends for the things that you were doing to the stepdaughter?
Immediately. That's how powerful it was. And then her mother and I didn't last much longer after that. And we separated in 1981, I believe. So between 81 and 83, when I married for 23 years, but immediately, and I say immediately because I felt them, and I understood. It's almost like alcoholics are not alcoholics unless they admit they're alcoholics and they go and seek help. Okay, well, I became an abuser, or I was an abuser, not become. I was an abuser. And when it happened, I immediately sought help. And upon that, as I tell people all the time when I do this, I cut the line. Whoa, cut the line. I don't put my hands on people anymore. It's been years, like serious years. I don't want to put my hands on anybody. So it was an immediate effect of me now understanding, recognizing that I had not just one issue, but many issues that I needed to address. And it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't one thing at a time that boom, it just happened. It was a longevity, even a marriage. Even my marriage of 23 years, it didn't last. But I was in that marriage because I was true to raising a child in the right environment.
When you,
And I gave away everything. My family, I put everything aside to raise that child.
how long did you remain in counseling or therapy, whatever you want to call it, from say, 83 on or 81 on? I don't know what year did you start? Did you make that decision that something was wrong? Was that?
We'll say 80, we'll say 81 after, because I still had issues. I mean, you don't just boom like that. You still have issues. You have the PTSD that you deal with, and you have, even to this day, certain things will trigger me in a more energetic way than other things based on my PTSD. But I've learned how to control that.
Now, has this been a lifelong therapy for you, where you're constantly involved, whether it's official or unofficially talking to somebody, or is it something that you've been able to manifest within yourself in order to? Because I get that. I was in therapy in high school, because of some traumas, and then I've learned over the years how to self-manage.
It's self-manage, even more so now at almost 64 years old, for this reason. Now, I don't know how much I can say this. I'm not a religious person per se, but I do believe in the Creator. I do believe in a higher power, and I know when those wow moments happen that there's a reason for that wow moment. Okay, so it was a long period of time, but it was a direct hit on me to make those changes, and I worked on them. And so, again, and I'm still working on them.
So you're married to the same woman. You're raising this child in the environment that you wanted to have the positive parental environment for this child, and then the marriage ends.
Yes. And
then what was the? Why were you at the point of breaking and considering suicide?
Well,
what was that period of time like?
Okay, so let's tell the reason, and the reason is that I started having a open conversation. My number one daughter, mother, got a hold of me in 1992, separated in 74-ish, okay, 73, 74. Our daughter was born June of 74. And had no contact, almost like my father. Here we go, dysfunctional cycles, right? She got a hold of me because in 1972, I dedicated James Taylor, You Got a Friend, just call me. And she wrote me a letter. I was married. She wrote me a letter and said, our daughter needs her father. Our daughter was 19. I hadn't talked to her since she was 3. And it wasn't just all mine. Mapawana went to Hawaii. I lost contact with anybody. And so in 1992, she found me, wrote a letter, and told me our daughter needed me. Well, that's a no-brainer. So I got a hold of her. I was able to spend some time with our daughter. But the same as with my father, there are gaps in our relationship that you'll never mend. You'll never heal them. You'll never mend them. But you move forward. So I was reunited in 2005 because I had separated. I had had enough, because the only reason I was staying in that relationship was for our daughter, and she was her first year in college. She was at a dorm, and it was time for me to bail because I basically was suffering in a relationship. Catherine Kahala Mapawana Momi Ka'o Kelly came back into my life in 2005. We started speaking, started intermixing, and I got a divorce. Catherine and I have been reunited going on 15 years now. And I now have great-grandchildren, grandchildren, 19 grandchildren when you count them all between hers, mine, and ours, between her kids and my kids. And so there was a time, I don't know, maybe it's that trait. after a 5-year hiatus, because we were separated. We never got a divorce until later on. I was just living my life. I was coaching high school sports, more so football at the time, and I was working. I was an auto carrier delivering cars, and I was living a happy life with my very first love. I say, go back to love. Mapawana knew what love was when she was 14, 15 years old. She had brothers and sisters. She's a Hawaiian. She knew what love was. I didn't. And that's how we ended. So I got a second chance this second time around, but I had that thought of maybe I should go back to my wife. True story. And I tried to rekindle a flame between after 5 years of going back to my wife. And we were seeing each other, we were dating, okay, we were talking, we were going to counseling, but I still had Mapawana, still had Catherine. Now, there was no relationship between Tammy and I. There was just us seeing if we could start over again. Well, that wasn't going to happen. But now I have this emotional feeling of wanting to make it right with a 23-year marriage, even though it was a 5-year separation. Something was beating on me at 50 years old to go back to my wife, go back to my daughter. But I know I have grandchildren. I have my other 2 daughters. I have my father, because there was no father in this. My ex-wife didn't have nothing to do with my father. We didn't intermix families. It was her side of the family, her mother's side, her father's side, and my side was non-existent. But one of the reasons why I left is because I needed my family. I needed my roots back into my life. I've been through all this stuff. I did all this. I need to make sure that when I go and I die, that I have made an attempt to reestablish my blood. And that's kind of sort of where I was at. So it was going back to Tammy or staying true with what I believed was supposed to happen. And I was an alcoholic. I was doing 30 packs. I would do a 30 pack in a day or two. And I had 30 packs empty, 18 packs, 12 packs, empty cans in the containers stacked up to the ceiling of the 1-bedroom apartment I had. And there was a day that I was so jacked up, I was sitting in the bedroom. Now, I've seen my mother try to commit suicide with pills and the wrist, and my grandmother. I had 2 uncles that died from suicide. I understand what suicide is, but I never even thought about it. So I am jacked up, sitting on the floor, and I'm playing Russian roulette with my 38 special. And God is good. My father called me. He said something that irritated me, and I said, let's find out what's going to happen. And I shot a hole in my mattress. That would have been in my head. So I was contemplating suicide because I was depressed and I didn't know where to go.
So when you get past that point, when you go the day after that day of being all whacked out on booze and wanting to kill yourself, when did the shift happen where you said, I'm done trying to repair my marriage, I'm going to get divorced, I'm going to go back with my first love, and I'm going to start to live my life in the direction that you're currently in?
I believe that was like January of 2010, because I had just retired. I believe it was January of 2010. And in February, I sat down at a table with my ex, got all my Teamster paperwork together. We signed the paperwork for the process of her starting to get my my Teamster's pension, a percentage of it. And on February 14th, Valentine's Day, I had all my stuff packed up in a trailer, in a truck from U-Haul, and I drove up to Northern California where Catherine lives, and I started a new life.
When did, I say I had a moment of grace in how I came out of my depression and the path that I went on since 2002, and how I can clearly see the steps which got me to where I am today. When did you figure out that you had a voice and that your voice had an impact and that you could share what you've learned throughout your life with other people? When was that moment?
I have it down on a piece of paper. I have it down on a piece of paper. I'm sorry. Um, I believe it was when Me Inc. Now, me expressing I need change now, came into my brain in a garage. I stayed 8 hours in the garage and I was just doodling, and I came up with me expressing I need change now. So about 7 years ago, understanding everything that I've gone through, the generational cycles, the abuse, the alcohol, the drugs, the incarceration. I mean, I was incarcerated when I was a kid, but not after 18 years old. So that's when I'm thinking to myself, well, Chuck, and I've been coaching sports for over 42 years. So I have always coached life. Any coach that's a real coach doesn't just coach the sports, coaches the character of the team involved in the sport, and the character is part of life. So I've been doing this for over 40 something years, and I have opened up Me Now Consulting, small business here in Fairfield, California, and we help those that are in need of some change for different reasons, anger management. But I work more so with the youth, high school and middle school, because I know what it was like in high school, or more so middle school, to live in the environment, the negative environment that we live in. And I want to help those young men and young women have a positive outlet, and that's in the educational field, which is at school.
I think it's, for me personally, I connect with that because that's my focus is on the youth and mentoring youth, and understanding that the ability to build positive mindsets, to create an understanding of their own ability and their strengths and their weaknesses, and how to build trust and relationships, and all those things starts, as you well know, either positively or negatively when you're a kid. And as adults, it's harder to change course, and the effort requirement of a coach or a mentor to help an adult change the direction they're going in is 100 times harder than it is to begin the process of molding a kid through the process while they're in the learning stages of their life. So I appreciate the fact that you've identified your strength in dealing with youth through your coaching experience, and understanding how, if somebody had done that when you were 10, 11, 12 years old, how your life probably would have been a lot different than what you had to go through throughout your life.
Well, Matt, I had that. I lettered in 5 sports at Long Beach. I graduated from Long Beach Poly. I think everybody knows about Long Beach Poly. I graduated from Long Beach Poly class of 74, and I lettered in 5 sports. And I also was in the band my sophomore year, because before I ran away from home, that was my outlet. And the coaches were aware of my environment. This is why Coach Chuck is doing what he's doing now, because I'm paying it forward to the coaches, the administrators, the teachers, the counselors, more so in my high school year. That's when it all came together, of giving me direction, giving me hope. Hey, I graduated with a 2.5, knowing, and I talk about that to the freshmen today, that a 2.0 or better allows you to participate in activities that can get you away from the ugly that you might be involved in. So again, yes, I'm just paying it forward to what was given to me, and coaching and sports has always been a part of my life. So that's what we're doing now, and being blessed to have been on a competition, and then being part of another thing, which I think you know about, we might want to talk about, has given me the understanding that the direction that I'm on, what I'm doing, even to this conversation, this podcast we're having today, is all part of the promise and the purpose of why I'm still here. And there's a reason, there's a why behind it, because there are more out there that need to be educated, even more so at a young age, that they can make a change. They have choice, and they can make a change whenever they choose to do so. This is why we're working so heavily on, like tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be in front of 3 freshman focused classes at the high school that I retired from. Because after I left the docks, I started working in the schools. That I get to focus on freshmen. And it's amazing how when you get into their heart and they start lowering those defensive mechanisms, those defensive walls, which you're aware of, and lower them, and we can get down to get into that heart, okay? Because we get into that heart, and they can trust us, and they can respect us, they can believe in us. That's when we can help them start making some choices for change.
Well, brother, we're going to have you on again in 2020. I want to make sure we get you back on again. There's a whole lot more we can dive into. Unfortunately, it's an hour-long show, and we're coming up on that hour. And I just want you to know that I'm thankful that you came on the show, that you shared your story, that you were so honest with things that had happened to you and the choices you made personally and the things that you've come to terms with in your life, and how you're using those experiences to help other people either navigate through what they're going through or to avoid going through those things themselves. So I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you. And yes, we do have something in common. I am a retired albatross, and you have a beautiful daughter that's out there swimming her tail off. And I follow her because you make sure you put it out there, out there, you know, and I don't know where her future is, but I know that she's a very powerful swimmer. And that's kind of sort of where you and I connected.
Absolutely.
So
and
I'm honored to be on your show, and anytime I can talk stories and help others, I'm all in.
Tell everybody what your website is and where they can best reach you.
Chuck Prinzen at yahoo.com is my website, or you can go to Me Inc. Now, www, small cap, MEINCNOW, and you can check out our website. You know, we're trying to build it up a little bit, but that, and then LinkedIn, and we're working on my Instagram, but more so just you can personally contact me through my website or my email, which is chuckprinzen@yahoo.com.
Awesome, brother. Well, I appreciate you. Hang tight. We're going to go offline here in a second, but I just wanted to close out the show, rock out a little heavy beat from my man Taylor, and I'm just thankful that we're having these times together, and I'm really excited about what the show, the direction we're going in, and all the things we have going on here with Dale and Jack Media. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again listening to the new and improved 2 Dates in the Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cooper. Thank you again to my special guest, Chuck Prinzen. And please, if you ever need anything from me, you can reach me at my website, mattcoopler.com, mattcuppler.com. And I answer every email and every social media. God bless, take care, and go out and be